Construction site limbo. Millions of construction workers in Britain have been left in complete limbo by completely unclear government guidance, where they have essentially all but shut construction sites. So legally, construction sites are still allowed to remain open and workers are still allowed to go and work on these sites and catch public transport, but the actual guidance from Public Health England means that they cannot reasonably carry out, in the vast majority of cases, safe coronavirus containing measures. Because how can you work on a construction site and practice 2 meters social distancing? It's completely unpractical, if not impossible, on these big sites. And so millions of people feel as though they are being forced to put work before their health and safety. They have to go to work because a million of them that work in construction are self-employed and so are freelance, etc. And so they will not currently be getting any financial assistance other than around £94 a week job seekers allowance or universal credit. So of course, facing economic misery, they're never going to be able to survive on that, so they will go and work. Many big builders have actually took the moral position and decided to shut down sites, such as Mace, Persimmon, Bellway, etc. They have actually took action and shut their sites so that workers cannot carry out any construction work. But many others are continuing to open, and many will continue to open for various reasons. One is that they won't want to, where they do have a liability for that. But many builders will not want to be paying sick pay for the workers that are, cards in and have contracts that would give sick pay. They wouldn't want to be doing that. And they don't want their contracts jeopardised, because many contracts will not have force majeure provisions, and so it may end up costing them additional unforeseen costs because of this coronavirus delay. And so many will want their subcontractors to carry on working so that it doesn't jeopardise and delay the contract, which could have all kinds of implications. And they haven't been legally forced to shut. I can understand why building a hospital to fight coronavirus is considered essential and must continue. I can completely understand that. And so I can understand why some suppliers of building materials, even though the major ones like Jewson's and Wolseley, etc., shut for a day or so, I think yesterday, whilst they seeked clarity of the government. But I can understand why some suppliers are still open to keep the wheels going on essential sites that must continue to fight this virus. But for many sites that are not considered essential and could quite easily be paused or suspended whilst this virus is contained, the ultimate fault lies again with the government, where they have given guidelines of 2 meter social distancing, which is completely legitimate guidelines, and it will work, it should do in theory, but they've given those guidelines and yet they haven't forced sites to shut which will not reasonably be able to handle those guidelines. When you're in the site canteen, which are very confined spaces typically, those porter cabin, very restricted access canteens, when you're doing toolbox talks to discuss the job and so forth, when you're erecting steelwork together in gangs, it's not practical that the majority of construction tasks could reasonably be done whilst carrying out 2 metre distancing between people. It's not possible. And so that is why the government, again, should have stopped all non-essential or non-urgent building work. But it hasn't done. And it hasn't done, and the question has to be asked, why? Well, one obvious reason, is that they still haven't provided any bailout package, essentially, for self-employed contractors, of which there will be probably over 1 million people. So, which constitutes probably a fifth of the self-employed people in Britain working construction. As I've mentioned before, many under bogus self-employed arrangements where contractors won't have to pay them sick pay, holiday pay, pension contributions, etc., whereas they would have if they were employed with a contract. So these workers will now have been basically left to dry. So by enabling them to continue working, they're obviously still going to get paid off their employers, and so off their contractors or whoever's employing them. And so the government will not have to pay them universal credit and will not have to currently bail them out. But it is putting the public at risk because the social distancing. I mean, how can you travel in a van with many contractors will have lads turn up, operatives turn up in vans with sometimes 4 people in a van. How can you have that when you're trying to social distance? Are you saying that each worker has to have his own van? If he does, where's he going to park? Many of these sites have extremely poor parking. The whole thing is not practically possible whilst carrying out the new guidelines. So they should have been shut, and the government should be bailing out and should be ensuring, like other countries in Europe, like Belgium, like France, like Spain, who are all, and Norway, etc., who are all providing a very strong insurance package for self-employed and freelance workers, so that taking an average or a median income from the past 2 years, so that the massive loss of earnings that they will have will not be borne by the workers who have not caused this problem. So the government is yet again liable, and they need to urgently shut these sites.